Hello, my friends. It is Wednesday, August 7th, and here is the news in Ukraine, the war news for today. This is the daily brief. 1,230 Russians are off the battlefield, 8 tanks, 29 armored combat vehicles, 67 artillery pieces, 78 vehicles and fuel tanks. At 1230, that's been ticking up to 1230. It's been down to 1,000 or 1,100, maybe into 900 periodically for the last week or so. So it's ticked up. The Andrew Perpetua's list shows about 1.5 to 1, maybe 2 to 1 losses of Russians, not quite 2 to 1 losses of Russians to Ukrainians. 30 Russian attack drones were shot down at night last night. But I'm going to go and talk about the big story, which is Kursk. But before we do that, I'm going to update on what's happened in the last few days. I'm showing a picture of this huge explosion and fireball from the weapon and fuel storage at the Mozorovsk airfield the other day. I mean, this was big, right? And then if you look at just what the Ukrainians have done to the Russians in the last few days, what they've damaged, it's somewhere between $3.5 and $4 billion worth in damages, according to Euromaidan Press, including an S-400 and an S-500 missile system. It's ridiculous what's happened over the last week. Okay, occupied Black Sea island targeted and daring Ukraine night raid. Now, I talked about this yesterday. The press that I showed you, the only thing that I had was a Pravda or RT report. So you have to take that with a grain of salt. And it showed, well, 3 of 12 boats were destroyed in that process. Yeah, they didn't say what happened on the Russian side. Ukrainian Defense Intelligence said Wednesday that raid on the Tendra Spit, a thin strip of land on the Black Sea, which extends from the Kherson region, was carried out by special forces. Scouts destroyed equipment, personnel, and fortifications of the occupiers. At night, a landing group of Special Operations Forces landed on the Tendra Spit and destroyed enemy armored vehicles, including MT-LBs, an enemy electronic warfare system, and Russian fortifications. During the battle, Russian invaders suffered losses among their personnel, but the exact number is yet to be determined. Okay, and you see the same thing here with a little bit about the armored vehicles and electronic warfare system and fortifications. And again, where was this? It was this little island out here off the coast. And I mean, you can hardly even see it unless I zoom in. And then you see Odessa's here, and this is the Tendra Spit. Okay, now, big story. So what Kursk doing, according to the Daily Fella? Again, the Kursk region. So yesterday we talked about it, and I said, I don't know that it's going to be much. You saw the Russians say they didn't breach the border, or they only breached the border about tens of meters in. Like it was nothing here. We repelled them. Well, turns out that's not exactly what happened. According to Russian sources, based on reports from locals, Ukrainian forces have already liberated western outskirts of Sudska, hanging the Ukrainian flag onto the hospital building. Fighting is reportedly ongoing at the entrance of the city. So that's a little bit over the border, right? That's like multiple kilometers, maybe 10 kilometers. I don't know exactly how far that is. So I discounted this yesterday saying, it's probably nothing to see here. And that was my assessment based on what has happened with the International Legion. But this isn't the International Legion. These are actually Ukrainian soldiers going across the border. That's different. Russian military bloggers dismissed reports of Ukrainian incursions into Russia's Kursk Oblast as unsuccessful and a media stunt, claiming it diverts attention from what ongoing offensives. Okay, so it could have been that. And again, we've seen that before with the International Legion, but that's not what's going on. The Russian Ministry of Defense and Federal Security Service, FSB, reported that Russian forces successfully countered several Ukrainian attacks near the Russian-Ukrainian border. Okay, but there's more to the story here. This is not looking good for Russia's Kursk region, as Russians complain that Ukraine has occupied several areas, with Russia no longer being able to operate aviation due to density of Ukrainian air defenses. This is a citizen from the region complaining that there's no army or air defense. Nobody helps people. The Russian government lies. There were Kadyrov's troops, but they ran away before things got hot. Remember Kadyrov's troops? They're the ones on TikTok shooting things and looking tough and driving on tanks and looking all like they're big and bad. they're really not. The Russian war instantly became less fun for them. Well, I mean, you shouldn't be involved in this to begin with. Ukraine's incursion into Russia's Kursk region continues into its second day. Wait a minute, I thought they repelled them at the border. No, they didn't. Ukraine's surprise incursion into Russia's Kursk region has continued into a second day, prompting Vladimir Putin to convene a meeting with his top defense and law enforcement officials. So it's not nothing. Official and unofficial Russian sources reported that a force of several hundred soldiers had crossed a lightly defended part of the border on Tuesday morning. Russia's defense ministry said on Wednesday that the attack was being neutralized. Well, sure it is, but they actually are over the border now. Okay, it had claimed that Russian forces had repelled the raid on Tuesday, but acknowledged at lunchtime on Wednesday that fighting was ongoing. It said that they had used air and missile strikes and artillery fire against the invaders, inflicting 260 casualties and knocking out 50 armored vehicles. Okay, but again, you can't believe what the Russians say. The attack is most likely to be an attempt by Ukraine, whose defenses are stretched on the eastern Donbas front, to divert some Russian forces to defend part of the front line that has been largely inactive since early 2022. I would agree with that assessment. That does strike me as that's what they're trying to accomplish here. And they're creating havoc for Russia, and it's a very big black eye for Russia that Ukrainians are coming across their border. Information is scant, but at this time, operation appears to be an attack by Ukraine's military rather than Russian opposition groups. And that's the difference maker. That's why I dismissed it yesterday, but it turns out this is actually Ukrainian military. Russia said it was led by Kyiv's 22nd Mechanized Brigade. Other online speculation suggested that a target of the incursion could be the Kursk nuclear power plant, but the facility is 35 miles from the border and a long way from what a force of several hundred or thousand would be capable of. Russia has been pouring soldiers into Ukraine. Its force in the country is now estimated at 520,000. Despite all the losses, 520,000. That's 3 times or so the invasion's original size. Okay, so Pravda is saying that their goal is to attack the Kursk nuclear power plant, and that's because, and here I'm quoting, why do Ukrainian armed forces need the Kursk nuclear power plant? It will come in handy. There are many options. They may demand control over the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant as a condition to leave Kursk. They may also demand the Russian troops be withdrawn from Ukraine. Otherwise, they will blow up the Kursk nuclear power plant. Like, the Ukrainians don't think like this, but that's how it's carried in Russian Pravda. Here's RT. Ukraine has conducted its latest large-scale provocation against Russia. You're at war, dude. Like, that's not a provocation. This is actually a war. This is a battle. It's not a provocation. More than 2,000 people have fled the border areas. Defense Ministry has claimed that Russian troops have inflicted serious damage on the Ukrainian forces deployed at the attempted cross-border operation. The military says Kyiv has failed to achieve its goal of securing a foothold in the Russian region, losing hundreds of fighters and dozens of pieces of heavy weaponry, but they're actually doing it. And, the Kadyrov TikTok army that's, I don't know what this guy's doing. He's shooting, and I'm not going to actually show the video, but he's shooting and talking about how he's big and bad and tough, shooting at a railroad track or something. But he's not actually shooting at anything. This is just like propaganda. This is posturing. And when you do see what they're actually doing, and I'm not going to show this because this video would not pass the YouTube censors, I'm not showing it. Kadyrov's Chechen soldiers are often accused of running from battle and being cowards. As Ukraine invades Kursk, Russia, here are the Kadyrov soldiers defending Russia. It's not clear if they're even in the battle or if they're shooting at trees. So that's what's going on there. Putin has accused Ukraine of launching another major provocation. Another defense officials said around 300 troops crossed into Russia's Kursk region. Putin does not think invading Ukraine was a provocation, though. So how is it not a provocation if they invade Ukraine, but Ukraine invading Russia is a provocation? That's hard to figure out. Meanwhile, she's got the toughest job. I'm not sure who's got a tougher job between Peskov or Maria Zakharova or Belousov or just who here. But she has to, listen to this. Zakharova, spokesperson for Russian Foreign Affairs Ministry on the situation in Kursk. She said this with a straight face. Listen to this. Moscow calls on the international community not to stand aside and strongly condemn the criminal actions of the Kyiv regime. Huh? Because they crossed your border? I mean, what on earth? Okay, and then I'll leave you with this. I wonder if they're thinking this in the Russian Ministry of Defense, like the high generals. I learned from the mistakes of people who take my advice. All right, my friends, that's all that I have for you. Thanks for the likes and the shares and the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.